Emma, thank you so much for being here today.
Oh, it's a thrill to be here. Thanks for having me.
I like to start every interview by asking guests, as a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Oh, I love that question. And I wanted to be a writer from
Oh,
the age of 14. Actually, originally I wanted to be a school teacher, and I
mm.
do have a teaching qualification, but I've never
Ah,
used it. It was really when I was 14 that I fell in love with the idea of being a writer, and it was after being introduced to Anne of Green Gables. My aunts and my grandmother and mother showed my sister and I the mini series back in the 80s, and then we read the books. But from the moment that I watched that program, I fell in love with Gilbert Blythe, of course. But then I also fell in love with the concept of Anne really striving to be a writer and constantly having stories in her head. And I remember the next morning just walking down the street to a little newsagent, because this, of course, was before laptop computers, and purchasing a notebook and pen and starting to write my first novel at
oh my
14.
gosh.
And it was meant to be sort of Australia's answer to Anne of Green Gables. So never going to see the light of day. But that was the moment for me. I just thought that makes sense. And my sister looked at me at the time and said, "Why are you wasting the school holidays on homework?" And I said, "This isn't homework. This is fun." And it's always been fun. Not all of it, not all parts of it, but it's been a long time. And I feel really privileged to have known all that time what I wanted to be when I grew up and
Mm,
to actually have a word for it.
that's beautiful. And tell us, was it a straight shot? You mentioned you have your teaching certification. How did you get from that 14-year-old who was writing Australia's version of Anne of Green Gables to today?
No, it was not a straight shot. So there's a 38-year time period in the middle of that between that moment and now. I'm 51. And I have only really in the last few months been able to sort of give up my day job and write full time. But I began my career in the Australian Public Service. So I had sort of administrative jobs for the first 10 years. And I remember times when I would cry in the toilets because I would just be thinking, I just want to write stories. And it just wasn't
Mm.
practical to just be writing stories and not sort of earning an income. So I did spend 10 years doing that and on and off after having my kids and having a bit of time out of the workforce and coming back. And then I left the public service and started a business with a friend where we would offer training and coaching and some online programs about things like time management and productivity and work-life balance.
Ah,
She and I co-wrote a book together, a non-fiction book about productivity, which was published a
oh,
few years ago. Yeah. Anyway, in the midst of all that, I also had a daughter who's now 24, but she was 14 at the time and she hated reading, but she loved Harry Styles. Still does 10 years later. And I thought at the time, why don't I just write a little story for her to show her that reading can be fun? So I wrote a book about a boy band for my daughter, and it started off for her, but it ended up being for me really because it's so much fun to write. And then my own school friend, Sally Whitwell, who's an Australian composer, she and I co-wrote a musical based on that novel after it was published. So that was just an absolute dream. So exciting and so much fun. And just being surrounded by teenage theatre kids. And so
so
that
you
was,
wrote this and it actually got to be put out into the world and performed.
yeah, it did. Yes. We performed it in my daughter's high school, actually. And we're now speaking to other schools. So this was just before COVID. So, of course, theatre and everything else sort of ground to a halt at that point. But I then had a situation where in 2016, I unexpectedly lost my husband, Jeff, who passed away from a heart attack. And I knew that I was going to have to write my way through that
Mm,
and through that loss and the grief. So I started to write a novel about loss, which eventually
mm.
became The Last Love Note, which was the one that was picked up in the US and published by Zippy Books. And I've just had my second adult book, Pictures of You, published there too, which is how you and I met at one of my
Yes,
events on the book tour.
yes,
So that's a
yes.
long story, but certainly it was a very winding road to get here.
Well, first of all, I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
It sounds like the books healed you, or at
It
least
really,
aided you.
it really has. Today is actually would have been my 16th wedding anniversary. And I was thinking about it this morning. Just one of the things I am proud of is the way that I've managed to sort of turn that ship around of loss. It was
Mm,
it was such a devastating, horrific thing to have happened. And my little boy was only 5 at the time,
Mm,
and it just plunged us into this absolute nightmare. And I feel as though it has also led to a different life that if I could swap back in an instant, I would, and I would give up all of what has happened in the last couple of years. But if we have to continue to live and to have a life, then I feel like we're throwing ourselves at it as best we can and making something out of this painful experience. And one thing that's been really rewarding is that the novel has really helped a lot of readers to process their own losses. I've spent countless hours and days and weeks probably over the last couple of years communicating with readers who've got in touch and said it really helped them to get through their own circumstances and
mm,
just to think about and articulate their losses differently. So, in that way, I'm really proud of that book and really the work that I've done, even though it's
mm.
been really difficult.
Yeah. And tell me, when you wrote your first book that got published by Zibby Books, did you write it hoping it would get published? Did it start out as a book to heal? Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bit of both. It was actually published by Penguin in Australia first, about a year before
Ah.
that. But when I started writing it, I was definitely using it to process my own
Hmm.
thoughts, and something difficult would happen. For example, I'd go into the bank and try to close Jeff's bank account, and they wouldn't let me because he wasn't him. And anyone who's ever lost anyone knows how fraught the whole administrative situation can be after you've lost someone, just tackling all of the accounts and admin. So I would write about that, which eventually made it into a scene in the book. And I think I realized fairly soon after starting to write it that it would turn into a book. I could have written a memoir, but I'm a real oversharer in my family, but nobody else is. So I had to be really careful about that. So I ended up turning it into fiction. And I think because of Anne of Green Gables, I'm such a romantic that it also ended up becoming a story of a midlife widow falling in love again, which hasn't happened to me, but I don't know,
Not
I just
yet.
can't
Not
help
yet.
myself. Can't help myself. That part of the story was really fun to write as well.
Mm.
And it has actually changed my life. It's meant that I could travel to the US and meet people like you at events, and it has been just an extraordinary experience. And both of those books have now hit the USA Today bestseller list, which is something I absolutely never envisaged when I first started writing.
That's beautiful. We met in Dallas at a book event that was hosted here in Dallas locally, and you were with your daughter.
Yes, I
And
was.
your daughter kind of moderated the conversation. Beautiful, smart, articulate. I think it wasn't maybe in the formal talk, but after I said, "You must be so proud of your mom." And she said, "I am so proud of her."
Oh, that's so beautiful to hear. It gives me goosebumps. And it's very mutual. And in fact, it's a family tradition because yesterday I went to my father's retirement, his sort of aged care place, and he and I sat together on stage and did an event.
Oh,
It's
that's
amazing why I'm
beautiful.
talking about it. So he
That's
interviewed
so
me at that
cool.
one. So it's kind of like a generational thing, really. We're all proud of dad and he's proud of us, and then we're proud of the next generation. It's just, I feel very, very lucky to have a family that supportive. But Hannah, thank goodness she came on the book tour because it was 8 states in 10 days. It
Oh
was
my
13
goodness.
flights. It was how many Ubers and hotels. And so she was extraordinarily helpful. But at the same time, she's doing her doctorate at the Australian National University in criminology. And my latest book, Pictures of You, has a coercive control storyline. And she's just been instrumental in helping me in her professional capacity as an expert in gendered violence. So to be able to tour with her, and we even did an event together at the Australian Embassy in Washington, D.C., where we're sitting on the stage, both being interviewed. And so that was such a highlight of my life, but also as my life as a parent and my career and her career, and really, really special. But the book is actually dedicated to Hannah because when she was about 7 and her sister was 5, I was doing too many things. I was working full time. I was trying to write my first book, and I was, for some reason, decided to enroll in a master's degree, which
Because
crazy
you
because
didn't have enough.
anyway, so I realized pretty quickly this was not possible. So I made the decision to pull out of the masters and shelve that for later. Still haven't gone back to it. I remember thinking, I can't wait to sit them down and tell them that I'm going to do this and we're going to have so much more time on weekends together and we can go to
Mm,
the playground and all of that. And I told them, and Hannah who was 7, burst into tears and said, "Mummy, you can't give up on your dreams."
Oh.
And I just remember having this really incredible moment, this sort of epiphany about parenting, that I'd sort of thought it was about loving them and looking after them and making sure they were fed and clothed and safe and giving them experiences. And I hadn't realized it's also about modeling for them that we also are people and have our own aspirations and dreams. And
Mm.
she had seen that. And so now to have come full circle
Mm.
with her and to be sitting beside her on a stage and listening to her speak about
Mm.
her PhD, it kind of has been this beautiful experience. So the dedication is to 7-year-old Hannah, who told me not to give up on my dreams, and to 26-year-old Hannah, who helps me unfold them, which,
That's going to make me cry.
oh no, it's just so lovely.
Oh, that's well, I
Yeah,
have a 6.5-year-old right now. She turned 7 in the summer, so I feel that because they are
yeah,
watching us.
they are. They really are.
Hmm. So tell me, what have you learned about yourself through this process? Because I hear it in how you're telling your story and how you've reached some of those dreams that maybe you didn't even think were possible.
Absolutely. I think what I've really learnt is the resilience to push through and the persistence to push through, because as a writer, any writer will tell you, you've got to have a thick skin. And I didn't. I really didn't.
Mm.
And probably still don't, because you are faced with so much rejection
Mm.
in order to get anywhere. It's just par for the course. It's very hard to get published at all. I have a chart on my kitchen wall these days where I'm aiming to be rejected 100 times every year. And it might sound negative, but it's actually
Oh,
really
that's
positive.
great. No, that's
Yeah, it's
great.
so great. And I get the kids sometimes to write on it for me to sort of really show them that this is just part of life, that we have to put ourselves out there. And the more that we do, the more likely something will stick. It's not my idea originally. I read it a few years ago from another writer, but I've been doing it now for about 4 or 5 years and I love it. And at the end of the year, I look at it and there's usually about maybe 30% of things do happen and come off, and the rest of them just don't. And I think that's such an important thing to remember, because we can get so focused on the things that go wrong and don't work and then think, well, that's it, I'm just going to give up. But it's not
Mm.
like that. So I really think that 90% of my success has come from being persistent and not ever giving up on this dream for 38 years. So I think that's probably the thing that I've learned, that I'm tenacious and I can bounce back from the criticisms, because it doesn't stop after you are published. You're then
Mm.
presenting work to the world and saying, what do you think about this? Why don't you leave a
Mm.
review on Goodreads? Like, it's quite terrifying to be a
Mm.
writer. And it's about sort of keeping in mind that you are writing for one person. I always try to think I'm not writing for a huge number of people. I'm just writing for the one person that I'm imagining reading my book. And it's sort of a relationship then.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that you started doing this list of rejections or potential rejections 4 or 5 years ago, which kind of lines up with you getting published.
Yes. It is.
Uh,
It's all connected. I wouldn't be without it. It to me is more important than my list of goals, which I also have. I have
mm.
both of those things on the wall all the time, every year. In fact, we had our whole family sit down and do it this year, including my dad, who's 92. He's actually ticked off several before any of the rest of us have. Several of his things that he wanted to do in 2025. So
How do you structure it, Emma? So do you put list of
I
things to
just,
try and then being willing
yeah.
to be rich? So not goals.
No,
Is
I've got goals separately, but what I tend to do is I don't wait to be rejected before I put a thing on the chart. So I just put up anything that I've put out there in the world. So
Oh.
any steps I'm taking, I'll put it
Mm.
up on the chart and then I'll either tick it off or I'll cross it off if it doesn't happen. And so I'll just keep going until there's 100 crosses, but I'll keep going after that too. So
Mm.
there's actually more than 100 things on that chart, but it's a record then of everything I've tried to do in a year. And it also sort of gamifies the whole thing and it
Mm.
takes the sting out of it. And the more things that you have out there, the less pressure I feel for any one of those things. Of course,
Hmm.
there'll occasionally be something that is really, really meaningful and important. You really hope that it happens. And it's always disappointing if it doesn't. But at the same time, I find that the more things I've got on there, some of them I even forget. I forget I've entered an award. It's a real surprise if it comes back. It really has taken the sting out of things that go wrong or that don't come off. It's just shown me that it's better just to skate through and scatter things out and see what happens.
Oh, I love that so much. And I had someone suggest something like that, that you can't control the results, but you can control the effort or the thing you try, the
Yes,
putting
that's so
yourself out
true.
there. So that reminds me, I think I'm going to start it up again to see
Yes,
what
yeah,
magic
so great.
2025
And
brings.
I think it's so great for your daughter to see as well. It's just the last thing that we want as parents is for our kids to see us as perfect or see that everything always goes well.
Mm.
I think it's really great. One of my kids is a real perfectionist, and so I love that he sees me trying for things and failing and getting up and doing something else. So I think that's just such an important message.
And you have it hung somewhere, or is it a
Yeah, in the
notebook?
kitchen, in the
Oh,
wall.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
So
So
very
I don't care.
visible.
Like people come into the house, visitors come over, they can all see it. I just want to, like, I've posted it at the end of the year on my Instagram.
That's
If there's
amazing.
any sort of commercial in confidence stuff that's out there where I've sent something, I'll obviously sort of hide
Sure,
that if I'm posting it. But other
sure.
than that, I just think, again, that even just sort of being sort of public with it makes it easier as well to
Mm,
get over that sense of what are people going to think if this doesn't work out. I just don't
mm,
care anymore. I don't know if that's something to do with being in my 50s now as well. I think there
mm,
are a lot of women in their 50s who say, I don't care what people think. I think
mm,
you do get a little bit more accepting of that the older you
mm,
get. So maybe that's part of it too.
mm. No, and I love that you say that it takes the sting out of some of it, because if we only try one thing and that one
Yes.
thing fails, yeah.
I really believe, especially as writers, that there are so many manuscripts that people have buried in the bottom drawer because they
Mm,
tried to show someone or they were rejected by an agent or a publisher once or twice and they thought, well, that's it. And
mm,
they gave up. And there's some brilliant writing in bottom drawers everywhere all
mm,
over the world. And I just think it's really quite heartbreaking if people allow themselves to be knocked down too quickly. I think if that's something that's hard for people, then doing something like this can just, it's like exercising muscles. It's just a different muscle. And the more you do it, the easier it gets.
oh, I love that so much. It's inspiring me to start my own this year. So, like I mentioned, I'm going to
Yeah.
encourage my clients too,
Yes,
because
definitely.
tell me what's next for you, Emma. What are you working on now? What do you want to write more books? What do you want to do? What's next for you? What are you dreaming about?
Oh, so many things. I'm in this very sort of interesting place where I think I can say this without details. I've just accepted an offer for optioning pictures of you for a television
Oh my
series.
gosh,
So I'm super excited about that. We haven't yet signed the contract, but it's all looking fabulous.
that's
So I want
huge.
to, yeah, that's a dream come true, and
Wow.
it comes after a lot of rejections as well. So that's
Mm.
the next big different thing, and I'm really keen. In fact, the producer was saying that I can join the writers' room and I
Oh my
can be
God. You
because
could be the
she's
next Shonda Rhimes.
so I said, I'm really excited about learning so much about the screenwriting business because I don't know anything about it. So to be able to be involved in all of that is just going to be a dream. I'm so looking forward to it. And anyway, it's just an option stage. People say don't get too excited because it
Sure.
still may not happen, but I refuse to not get excited about something like
And that
that.
in and of itself is huge.
Yeah, it's a huge step, isn't it? So that's one thing. And then I'm writing my next book, which is coming out next April, I think, with Zibby Books and also in Australia and the UK. And then I've still got my musical that Sally and I are speaking to a couple of schools in Australia now. So we'd love to see that on stage again
Oh,
and sort
fun.
of my happy place. And I don't know, whatever else happens in 2025, that's
Whatever
probably
else
enough.
comes from the rejection
Yeah,
list,
that's
right?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
I love the thought that I don't know what else might happen.
Mm.
That's really exciting too. What I'd really love is to have a retro caravan and just park at the beach and write books. That would be my dream. That's on my list. I hope to be interviewed by you again one day and say,
Yes.
there's a picture of my caravan.
Yes.
You don't call them caravan, do you? I came across this in the US when I was there and I said something about a caravan and the people are thinking of several things in a row. And for us, it's the little vintage 1960s shape
Oh,
poet behind your car, you know?
yes,
So
yes,
it's
yes,
like,
yes.
that's what I mean when I say
I don't know what we
that.
call them here, but
I don't
I
know,
don't,
but
yeah.
you can imagine.
I started this podcast because I used to be in a job that wasn't probably the right one for me. I wasn't feeling motivated or fulfilled in a way that I knew I really felt like was possible. And I found the career I'm in now, coaching, and I love it. I'm energized by it. I feel like it gives me purpose. And I want that for people. I want people to find work that they love. And it sounds like you found work that you love from what you've
Yeah.
shared. What would you
Yeah.
say to someone listening who isn't feeling motivated by their
Yeah.
job, their work, and feeling a little hopeless?
I would say I have been there, definitely. I was there for a good decade and I know exactly how trapped I felt. And
Mm,
part of it was hard to give up the stability of the income, which,
mhm,
now, 20 years later, I'm thinking, well, there's not much stability anyway in a lot of these jobs that used to be more stable, particularly
mm,
public sector roles. Anyway, I eased out of that into where I am now, and it didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual thing. I did have what I refer to now as a couple of safety net jobs after I left that stable job. And I did some consultant copywriting. So I was writing for businesses and government websites and things. But it was, flexible and in my own time. And it meant that I had a little bit of income coming in that I could feel I could rely on while I was building up my other work. And
mm,
as I said, I've been doing that until very recently when I'm finally now able to focus on writing novels full time. But
mm,
that hasn't happened quickly. And so I think in some cases, people are able to just take that leap because they are somehow supported or able to financially do it instantly if they just make the decision and do it. But a lot of people, it's more of a process over time. And I think I'm so grateful now for those other roles that I held in the last 10 or 15 years that allowed me to ease into this in a way that was still safe because I did become a single mother 8 years ago with 3 kids after Jeff died. So it wasn't a matter of just being able to throw it
mhm,
all out and do it. I was the income earner in the family. So it's been hard, but so worth it. And I
mm,
sometimes think, what if I'd never done it? I'd be
mm.
miserable. That's my advice, I guess. It's kind of a mix of take the leap, but be sensible.
Yes. Emma, you are so inspiring. I love learning your story and I loved getting to talk with you a little more.
Oh, thank
I got
you.
to meet Emma in
Lovely.
person in Dallas and then ran into her the next day at the airport going to Charleston. I was going
Yes.
to a work retreat and she was going to her next book talk. I saw a bag and I was like, I recognize that bag from the store
Yeah.
we were
Yes.
So, so lovely to get to spend more time with you. Where can people follow along? Where can people find your books? Tell us all the things.
Emma Gray author on Instagram and Facebook. And if they go to zibbymedia.com, they'll find my books. And they're in Target, Barnes and Noble, a whole bunch of beautiful independent booksellers and online as well. So hopefully they'll find them fairly easily.
Yes. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you. It was beautiful. Love talking to you.